All right, I'm Destin, and you're Matt.
I am Matt, and it's No Dumb Questions podcast.
We have a very special episode today. We have Amy Lutz, the correspondent, who is also the guardian of memories.
That is correct.
We just gave you free reign today. We're just going to see what's up.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Glad to be on, though.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
We will follow your lead because you keep tabs on all the things that happened before now. That is your area of purview. Mm-hmm. So that would include the things we said 15 seconds ago because you're the guardian of memories. So that can be anything. That can be politics, science, history of medicine, history of culture, or history of film. And I think you tipped your hand, and maybe we're doing history of film.
I did a little bit. So we're talking a little bit about a very exciting historical, world important film series, Star Wars.
I've heard of it.
Yes!
I would hope so, because this would be a very interesting podcast had you not.
I watched one of those.
So you're talking about the history of Star Wars? Is that what, or like just
think
Star Wars in general? Just have fun with it? What are we doing?
I think let's have fun with it. You know, as I was telling you guys in the so-called green room, I think we look at this as I did when I was a grad student. I'm going to throw some questions out. I'm going to throw out my very in-depth theories about various Star Wars things, and then we'll just see what happens. And I think we should wrap up, keep people on till the very end, with our definitive Star Wars rankings, because mine are correct. But I would also like to hear what you all think as well.
I like it. Okay. When we do rank at the end, are we going to be ranking like the characters or the episodes, or what is it we're going to be ranking so I can be thinking about it as we talk?
Yeah, so I think we just do movies. So we won't talk about TV shows, which are great, are in their own little bubble, but we're just going to do the movies, however many there are, I should know off the top of my head, and we'll just go in order, see what we all think.
Okay.
I love it.
I'm in. Let's do it.
All right, let's get started, everybody. Well, let me check on you guys. Have you heard the latest Star Wars news about this Star Wars hotel?
Oh.
Yes, I heard there was a Star Wars hotel.
We should all be doing this podcast from the latest Star Wars hotel.
I heard the Star Wars hotel rollout has been
not great.
Maybe not what the Star Wars people would hope.
Well, it hasn't been great because every night is about $5,000, something like that.
What?
You expect a lot when you pay that to sleep.
Yeah, it's very expensive. It's very immersive. I mean, not that I've been, but it's not rolling out, and the creators can't figure out why it's not working. It's because it's $5,000 a night.
$5,000 a night. I'm trying to think of
at least
how you could burn $5,000. I mean, what service? Whatever. Anyway, that's a lot of money.
We won't go too deep into it.
Okay, got it. So, is it at Disneyland or Disney World?
So I think it's in Florida. I mean, I was thinking about this recently because I was actually at Disneyland about 6 weeks ago, and I was at Galaxy's Edge. Have you guys been to Galaxy's Edge? Starland?
I have.
It's great. And so the hotel is kind of like immersive, except you like go to sleep there and there are characters around. Anyway, not to dwell on the Star Wars hotel, but being at Disneyland and being at Galaxy's Edge got me thinking about all of this. And we have this new Kenobi show. Have you guys been watching this?
I haven't.
Yes.
We have a rule at our house where the whole family has to be together in order to watch either Mandalorian or Obi-Wan. And my kids have been doing camp stuff, and so we haven't actually been able to watch Obi-Wan yet, and it really burdens my heart because he's my favorite character of all of Star Wars.
Well, he was.
I'm going to have to sit here and try not to spoil you on what happens.
Oh, okay. Okay. I mean, it's just one episode, right? Only one episode?
No, it's 4. It's on the 4th episode.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It's almost over.
I feel like a bad person.
That's all right.
Nope. You're allowed not to watch it. It's okay. It's a moral choice everyone gets to make. And if you skip it, there could be upsides to that as well.
Oh, my goodness.
That is a great unintentional segue into some of the things that I want to talk about today.
Wonderful.
So
okay.
So the idea of choice is so central to Star Wars, right? And so at some point, let's kind of put a pin in this, and I want to talk about during this episode really what the moral of Star Wars is. What does it mean? Why do we watch it? What do we get from it? Yeah. I have thoughts, and I have many thoughts after watching the trilogy again, the prequel trilogy, and suffering through that. This week has given me lots of information. But here's where I want to start on some things to think about. Star Wars came out, 45 years ago? quite a while ago. It's been around
77,
since 77.
right? Yeah.
So that would be
Has
about,
it been 45
it's been 45
years?
years ago.
Okay.
It's been a long time.
Wow.
And,
okay.
and it's become this big behemoth. So I want to think about, and I've got a couple thoughts, but I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. Why are we still talking about this? Like, why on a podcast in 2022? What is it about Star Wars that we are still sitting here talking about it?
Okay. This is what's so interesting about this to me. I feel like I am sitting down at the table with two people that really know story and really care about things. I feel like the odd person out here because I think about photon torpedoes and like all the things, but you guys are at your next level. I feel like the child at the adults table right now.
Come on now.
I just
You're
kind of
well
do
at this stuff.
Yeah, but I actually enjoy it because I want to see, I feel like Matt finally gets to talk to someone that understands him, or at least cares at his level.
Amy's always been good for that.
Yeah, I know.
We're the
But
humanities brains here.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. The humanities brain. So I would say that I enjoy Star Wars because of the escapism of it, and I enjoy connecting with the characters. So the character arc of each individual character is interesting and unique. Not unlike Top Gun that we talked about last time, which is why, by the way, I have this mustache, Amy. So
That explains it.
that does, yes, thank you. So, and also, sorry. So, I think that I think that the character arcs are fascinating. Anakin turning into Darth Vader. For me, my favorite moment in all of Star Wars is the lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin. That's it. Like, that is an amazing moment for me. And I know it was in the prequels, and I know that I don't know. For me, that was one of the redemptive things about the prequels was the fact that scene got made. So I don't know. Why are we still talking about it, Matt?
Well, first of all, the prequels just keep looking better. And that's not a compliment to the prequels.
Oh.
That's a question about what on earth is going on now. And I think we get right into it by asking, why are we still talking about it? Well, that answer comes in waves. For me, wave number one of why it worked and why it embedded itself as a modern myth that people care about is because it leaned into all of the pulp of the 20th century. It captured 100 years of wondering about the stars and technology and what we could do. We think of that as being all one block, but 45 years ago, we'd never seen anything like that. Nobody had ever imagined what it would look like if there was a whole other existence. And yeah, the names and the faces, they look kind of similar. We'd seen it in books, but we'd never seen that on the screen the way we saw it. And it felt like there was this whole world behind it, and we were just getting the little tip of the iceberg, but in this alternate reality that is a long ways away and a long time in the past, there's still this thing that just makes people, that makes characters. And so we could divorce it from a whole bunch of things we might have been worried about in 1977, and we could go to this other place and explore the things, the classical themes of humanity, good, evil, slay the dragon within so you can slay the dragon without, all of those things. And so it was probably the most influential swing at the hero's journey mythos in American history. I don't think you could talk about anything that more captured imagination and that more created, or rather tapped into categories of good, evil, right, wrong, heroism, mentor, mentee relationship, love, intrigue, all of that stuff. I mean, it's Norse mythology, but in space with wizards and with American sensibilities. And I think in wave one, that's why it caught everybody's attention, because it was so imaginative, so different, and so big and bold, and the character arcs paid off. Then you get to the prequels, and that's wave two. And now we're into a whole new age of marketing, weaponizing Taco Bell pogs and Burger King action figures and Pepsi Summer of Fun, Yoda kitsch. Like, people wanted to see a cartoon Yoda flip around a lot and for there to be a lightsaber somehow attached to him. That's what people wanted. And they gave it to us. Boy, did they give us lightsabers. I mean, countless lightsabers. And everybody went to all three of those movies and came out and was like, that was awesome. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wait, maybe it wasn't. Oh, gosh. Oh, no. What just happened?
What was Jar
Oh, crap.
Jar?
I thought about it for 5. Yes!
And the CGI is not aged well. I can confirm that.
No.
You went back
the
and watched
green
it.
screen.
I did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that was different. It stuck because a gajillion dollars got spent on a global marketing campaign to seize on the first round of nostalgia and make it work with mythology. Now it's in everybody's psyche. It's in the mindset because somebody took a myth and they don't know what to do with it. They spent a ton of money on a new myth and they don't know how to complete arcs. They want to move away from a hero's journey. And I get it. We've seen that story for thousands of years. Maybe some fresh, turn it on its head take could be appealing. But that lack of a plan wouldn't be a big deal if it weren't a lack of a plan over the top of a mythology that everybody already embraced and made a part of their personality and that they allowed to shape themselves. And now the myth gets reshaped and people are like, I don't know how I feel about it. And so why does it matter? It matters because of birth, weird middle age, and now whatever this is in its old age that causes people to go back and reread the way they adopted the myth early on. That's my theory.
I have two questions about this. So I'll ask them both at the same time. The first question is, were the books written before the movie, the first movie? The second question is, what is a hero's journey and how does it apply to storytelling? So, yeah, whatever order you want to answer that.
These are great. And so actually it's funny. I'm going to use an example from the wrong movie and say that Matt and I have a mind meld going on because you effectively just gave my answer as well.
Sorry.
No worries. I have lots of thoughts about the books. So no, the books, there's kind of two sets of books. There are the novelizations of the films, which come with a lot of films like this. And then there's the extended universe, which didn't used to be the extended universe. And so I, as a very strange high school kid, read the Heir to the Empire trilogy, the Timothy Zahn books, all of those books, which, by the way, have made it into the sequel movies. Lots of elements from the EU, whether it's intentional or not. I do think it's intentional. Some actual characters have made it.
EU meaning extended universe, not European Union.
Extended universe.
Gotcha.
I should be clear.
Thank you. I was sitting there thinking about Euros. I appreciate
the
it.
European Union.
Okay.
No, the extended universe, which is not canon. That is the important part. Although I think
so. What? This is helping me. I thought we were just going to talk about our favorite movies, but this is so much better than what I was expecting. What is the line between normal Star Wars? I don't even know the terminology, and extended universe. What do you call normal Star Wars?
That is the canon set of Star Wars movies, the Skywalker trilogy and everything associated with it.
Okay, and what is the extended universe? Where is the line of demarcation?
So the extended universe are primarily a set of books. Actually, right now, I think they're all books, maybe some comic books that have been...
A couple video games.
That have been written over the last 30, 35 years, maybe a little bit more. That before the prequels arrived, before the sequel trilogy arrived, were kind of considered to be canon. They were considered to be actual real. And so what I mean by canon is the canon are the movies, the books, the video games, the television shows that actually track the actual story within the Star Wars world. The extended universe are those pieces of the property that are essentially fan fiction. I mean, I think that kind of minimizes them a little bit because I think some of them are quite good, but they're not considered to be part of the actual Star Wars universe in the general sense.
So for example, the animated series Clone Wars.
That is canon.
That is canon.
That is canon, yes.
Okay. Yes. And okay, I see. What makes it canon? The fact that it was made by some Lucasfilm?
Disney owns it.
Okay. Okay.
Essentially, at the end of the day,
it's that crass. That's
Disney
a great
owns
answer,
it.
though.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
Okay.
And then they pull these little threads from the EU. So, like, let me get real deep into the extended universe. Not real deep,
please.
actually, but you talk about, like, the character Thrawn, who came from the extended universe, makes it into the animated series, and is now making it into the live-action series, someone we haven't seen shown up yet. So that's someone that was actually pulled from the extended universe and moved into the canon. And so there are elements of that, and I could hear me talk about 2 hours about the elements of the EU and the sequel trilogies. There's pieces that have been pulled and made canon.
Oh, okay. And there's a panel, I think we talked at some. There is a. Let me pull this out from the back of my mind. Someone I've talked to. I'm not going to reveal their name because I don't want to. I don't know if they're allowed.
George Lucas.
It was me. No, I'm just kidding.
Like, for example, Disney, before they make a decision that has anything to do with a princess, they have this board of people that's like the princess board or the princess panel, and they have to approve of the decision for that particular princess. Would she do that? Okay, well, we will allow that to happen. So there's this panel of decision makers that make that happen. And so the branding around the princesses of Disney are so strong, they have to kind of defend against things they don't want in there. Is there a governing body, maybe, associated with Star Wars? They're like, surely they would call themselves the Jedi Council or whatever. But like, do you think there's got to be a group of people somewhere that approve these stories? Because some of them are weird. And I don't know. You can tell, like, as Star Wars goes along, it was George Lucas got to call the shots. And then as we went prequels, you could tell that there were some liberties taken. And then more recently, the one-off movies, there's some really weird stuff happening story-wise. Like what? Yeah. So anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
I see Matt nodding his head, wanting to jump in. But yes, I mean, I think it's Kathleen Kennedy and all these Disney executives, right?
I don't know.
I feel like yes-ish. So Kathleen Kennedy, Destin, to bring you up to speed. Kathleen Kennedy is, I would say, beloved by none, but indifferented by many. There's lots of people who are like, okay, like there's Star Wars. You got space lasers and stuff? Cool, whatever. Whoever makes that happen. Like, I want to watch a thing with my kids. Give me some space lasers and like maybe like a little frog pig thing that hops around, and I don't know, maybe some trade route regulation debate. Like, just give me that. I'm fine. And those people who just want that, I would say they don't know Kathleen Kennedy's name. They don't care about her role as executive.
I am in this bucket. This is the bucket.
You're the indifferent one.
They never cared.
Yes.
Like, they had a Jedi they liked, and it's fine. Then you've got the folks who are not a fan, and those folks, their accusation against Kathleen Kennedy would be that she is the face. She's the person who ruined the franchise after Disney bought it. Now, she predates the Disney purchase, but she took it in this kind of nonsensical direction that a lot of fans feel is disrespectful to what they felt about the stuff growing up. I do not have such passionate feelings about a movie franchise so as to go to that extreme. But generally speaking, I thought the story has been most interesting when it's in the hands of Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni.
Yes.
Dave Filoni is a Star Wars guru who had connections to George Lucas's ideas about the story, but Filoni is a better storyteller than Lucas. I mean, he's an excellent story craftsman. He's good at linear storytelling, nonlinear storytelling, onboarding new characters. All of the new beloved characters that have come on board since the first 6 episodes, so mid-2000s on, have been overseen by Dave Filoni. All the characters no one cares about, like, look, call it what it is. The characters that haven't hit look like Kathleen Kennedy brainchilds. So, child's children, whatever. And so there is a rivalry within Star Wars fandom between those who are like, no, this is saying important social things, and we like how more of the Kathleen Kennedy-led projects highlight those items. Then there are those who are like, I don't know, I really like the Star Wars lore, and I feel like Filoni and his buddy Jon Favreau, who's happy in Iron Man and is huge, I mean, wildly talented man. We like the direction they take it more. Now, The Mandalorian is their brainchild. They executed the seasons of The Mandalorian. The Clone Wars is a Dave Filoni project. Bad Batch, I think, is directed by a gal named Jennifer Corbett. Jennifer? I think it's Jennifer. And that's a fantastic series that most people don't know about, but it's genius. You don't get really lightsabers or Jedi or anything. It's just some guys trying to figure out their relationship with this new evil empire that used to be good, but now it turned evil. And it's great. And so what you have is, theoretically, it's one corporate entity. It's Disney Star Wars. But you've got this imagined tension that the fans project onto it. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. I have no idea. Between Kathleen Kennedy and a couple of these dudes who've had more success and who've created more beloved characters and more beloved story arcs. The people who like the Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, Mandalorian type stuff, they want more of them. The people who don't care. And that's kind of the way I think the scene breaks down. So there is no board that you can point to and be like, hey, we hate the myth. We'd like to just let you know we don't want this character to do this or become this. Like, it's just it's dumb. Please don't take the story there. Go anywhere else. Just please. There's no one to appeal to. So then this fandom conflict manifests in such a way that people discontinue their Disney Plus service, say angry things on Twitter, or just offer valid criticism on Twitter that then Star Wars goes victim mentality on and tries to act like with some kind of cruel attack, where sometimes maybe it is and sometimes it's not. The point is people super care, and there are definitely divisions, and there is no board or recourse to express your concerns with what the company does with your beloved myth that you've allowed to become welded to your soul. Thus, you get Star Wars chaos. How was that, Amy? Does that sound like your experience?
I think that's fantastic. Let me say, I actually take kind of like a third bubble. You know, we talk about those two areas in the fandom. Here's my thinking, because I think of, and I can't be the only one who's thought about this. Why is it that there is so much of this fracturing and kind of plot confusion and narrative confusion in Star Wars world that you don't see as much in the Marvel films? Like, there is a thread in the Marvel films, and that is the big difference, is that with the however many 20 some odd Marvel films there have been over the last 20 years, there is an intentional thread through each one of them.
Yeah.
Many of the people involved knew where they were going to end up, all of that. Whereas because of this kind of inner turmoil, and because there is not one person, there's not a Paul Feige or whoever it is at the helm saying this is where Star Wars is going to go, it fractures, and you please some people and you don't please some people. I mean, the Filoni-Favreau world is objectively, in my mind, much better. I love The Mandalorian. I love what they've done. Objectively, it very clearly is. But I think there's more to it. I think it's because you have these two sides that don't go together, and there's no narrative in it. You know, one of the things, if we jump to the sequels really quickly, that my brother and I were actually talking about is the problem with Rise of Skywalker, aside from the name, because it is the worst name in the history of Star Wars. But the problem with that movie is that they tried to please everyone. They tried to please the people who grew up with Star Wars. They tried to please the people who liked The Last Jedi. Spoiler alert, I may be one of them. And they tried to please people who like the TV. I mean, all of these different factions.
Me too. I thought it was fun.
So there was a bit of a narrative mess in it. And I think that's the problem we're seeing with Star Wars, the entire universe, is that there just has to be some sort of connection to it. Otherwise, it's just going to be these interconnected little pieces of property that kind of look alike, but have their own independent identity. And so we've really just gotten into this world of chaos, you know, which again is another great theme of Star Wars. The idea of chaos and order.
I remember being a 13-year-old boy going over to my friend Steve-O's house, and they would have all these Lego characters, and they had read all the books, and they had the Chewbacca character, and they had all these other characters, and his favorite was Boba Fett. That was his favorite character in all of Star Wars. And I remember not understanding where these people fit. And so if I understand you correctly, are you saying that from one character in one movie to the next, that thread of that individual character might not be continuous from one to the next? Or is it just the overall story is not continuous? Which of those are you saying?
It's more the overall story, but I will say within the canon, so let's put the EU aside for a second. Within the canon, there are story arcs and threads that go in unexpected ways is probably the best way to look at it. You know, so if you look at, I just rewatched Phantom Menace. Again, not a great movie. Darth Maul appears to have died, and then he shows up in the animated series, and suddenly he's alive again, which is something that people who
being severed directly in half through all of your organs in your abdomen, and then falling down a bottomless pit, not guaranteeing of death. Yeah, no one's ever really gone. Wars.
Well, and that's the problem, because there's no stakes. There's no stakes in it because anyone can come back, anyone can show up, even if they're just showing up as a Force ghost or in a prequel trilogy or something. And so it kind of pulls that emotional tie from the movies out, which is why, go in a different direction. It's actually why I think the Rogue One movie is fantastic, because it has such an emotional core to it, and it has stakes, and it ends in a way that's very sad. So I think the universe has gotten very out of control, in a way that's very allegorical to how the actual narrative of Star Wars went exactly through the prequels.
Well, yeah, I thought you were going to say, which is allegorical to us.
Well,
like, I feel
it is.
So goes Star Wars, so goes us.
That's a little much,
the other way around. Hey, how long has the debate existed?
I don't know.
Does art imitate life or life imitate art? I mean,
this is
people
so
have wondered that
beyond
since the
my
dawn of
ability
time.
to understand the existential conversation of. I hear you. The fact that there's no stakes makes a lot of sense to me, because when the Force Ghost appeared in, was that Rise of Skywalker?
The first time we see the Force
I mean,
Ghost?
that was way earlier. That shows up early. I mean, you
I
have
guess
Yoda
you're right.
show up in Last Jedi. No,
Yeah.
Rise of Skywalker. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they show up throughout the series.
Yeah, Yoda shows up as a ghost.
He does.
And countermands everything he taught and said at every other point in his existence.
Right. When that happened, I just remember thinking, oh man, you're absolutely right. Anybody can come back at any time and there are no stakes. And if they feel like I'm not as excited as I should be, they can bring back something from a long time ago to make me excited again. That kind of thing. That's pretty much what you're saying?
Well, that's what happened with Boba Fett, right? Boba Fett really had a couple scenes in the original films, but because of the EU, because of the prequels in a sense, because you see Jango Fett show up and then a young Boba Fett.
And because he looks awesome.
He did look awesome. I get it. He had all the toys and things with Boba Fett and his jetpack. But that was really hearkening back to the original trilogy, bringing Boba Fett into The Mandalorian, and then ironically bringing The Mandalorian into Boba Fett, which actually made it better. It did. The best episodes of Boba Fett are the backdoor episodes of The Mandalorian.
And it ain't close. Yes, Boba Fett is Mandalorian season 3.
It is, and it's great. Or at least the parts where The Mandalorian shows up.
Yes.
But let's pull back to an area that's more Destin's world, maybe a little bit.
No, I kind of like watching you guys go there, and it's like seeing people play in a really fun place and not knowing how to play the game, and you're like, I need to learn the rules. That's what it feels like, right? I remember watching people play volleyball at a church camp years ago, thinking, if only I could play volleyball, but I don't know how. That's kind of what this feels like, but it's really fun to watch you because I am learning by watching you guys talk about it. So that's where I'm at.
I want you to play volleyball metaphorically too, Destin. I'm sorry I made you watch our volleyball game.
This episode of No Dumb Questions is sponsored by Audible. And Matt, I'm about to do this thing where I legit try to convince you that we should listen to a book together. You ready?
I do know what book you're trying to convince me about. I do not know anything about said book, and I'm not going to make it easy.
Okay, that sounds great. That's fair. So I'll go ahead and read the offer we have. If you want to try Audible, go to audible.com/NDQ or text NDQ to 500-500. That gets you a 30-day trial, a free book, and access to the library. You can do that by going to audible.com/NDQ or texting NDQ to 500-500. Audible is a place where you can get awesome audiobooks. And the audiobook I'm going to recommend to you is called The Apollo Murders by Chris Hadfield. Now, this book is interesting because I know Chris Hadfield. We know each other, and he mailed me a copy of this book, and he's got right here on the front cover, Destin, I felt smarter every day by researching this, and then he says something that plays into a pivotal moment in the book. I will now try to convince you that we should listen to this book, Matt. So Chris Hadfield is an astronaut from Canada, and he has flown in Russian spacecraft and American spacecraft, and he's spent a lot of time on the International Space Station.
Cool.
So Chris is fluent in Russian. He's fluent in French and English. He's a very interesting person because you've got American astronauts, you got Russian cosmonauts, you've got all, everything in between, people from ESA. Chris was from the Canadian Space Agency, and he wrote this book, which is a fiction book, and it takes place back in the late 60s, early 70s kind of time frame. I guess it's the late 60s.
Thus Apollo.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The premise of the book is there are some murders that take place, and they're trying to figure out how and why they happened. And you are following the point of view of several characters, one of which is a test pilot who lost an eye during a bird strike. And this test pilot is now being put in the position of, let's just say, an operations expert. And so he is an advocate for the crew, the Apollo crew, on Apollo 18, which didn't happen in real life. But Apollo 18 in this book is U.S. military astronauts who are going to do something in space that involves, how do I say this? Subterfuge / sabotage of Russian space hardware.
So the murders are to keep this trip from happening and to keep the mission from succeeding?
I'm not going to tell you who gets murdered by whom because that would give away too much. But I will tell you this. Let me just go to the back. So at the very end of the book, now it's narrated by a guy named Ray Porter, who's a very, very, very good reader. In the very back of the book, it's all fiction. However, the people in the book, most of them are real. Like, for example, there's a sheriff in Texas that's involved in the story. Chris went back and researched that sheriff in Texas and then wrote some fictional things that this sheriff would do. You've heard of Gene Kranz in Mission Control. Gene Kranz is in the story, and he is put into fictitious situations, but knowing what we know about Gene Kranz, it's almost like we get to run this artificial intelligence that is Gene Kranz and see what Gene Kranz would do in the situation.
Did you feel like all the characters who are actual historical figures behaved in ways that are consistent with the trajectory of life that they created for themselves when they were alive to do that?
I think so. So that's what's so interesting. Like, for example, there's one African-American astronaut that was going to be the first African-American astronaut ever to go to space. He died in an Air Force accident. So Chris keeps that person alive, and he's part of the mission. And I mean, there's so many interesting historical things that Chris did in this book, and there's so many technical challenges because the Apollo flight profile is well known. And so what Chris does is he puts some of these characters along that flight profile, but there's all kinds of things that happen in between. And let's just say that the Russians get involved, like in flight. The Russians get involved in flight in ways that are really, really interesting. I will read one small section from the author's note. It's the Almaz space station. The Soviet spy space station in the story was real, including the fact that it was armed with a Kartek R-23 machine gun. It launched unmanned on April 3rd, 1973, but it was fatally damaged after 2 weeks by an explosion and depressurized into a trail of debris before the crew could be launched to dock with it. Its orbit decayed until it burned up in the atmosphere on May 28, 1973, and a subsequent Almaz station was also armed with an R-23 gun, which was fired once in a successful test. The Russians had a space station with a gun on it, like a big gun. Dang. And I didn't know that until this story. Let's put it this way. Chekhov's gun in this in this book.
It gets fired?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't have the gun without the...
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, let's go.
I have a lot of questions. Would you have to burn to counter the effect of firing a bullet in space? I mean, wouldn't that affect the orbit and positioning of something in 0G?
That is a very good question. This was actually a problem encountered by the military at some point, and they actually came up with a way around this, something called the Davis gun principle, where you could have a gun that ejects the powder out the backside of the weapon. It's also referred to as a recoilless rifle. But that question you asked is very, very good. And the answer is yes, if you have a casing of some sort. I mean, and so there's all kinds of questions, like what happens to the casing from the bullets? I don't know anything about an R-23 machine gun, but I want to know about it. Anyway, this whole book, the whole story that Chris created, it's all fiction. It's worth your time if you want to just kind of escape and go on this mental journey of what could have been. Also, all the physics holds. We're just going to run a different simulation on what Nixon's doing, what Al Shepard's doing. Very, very interesting.
Okay. Who am I tracking with as we go through the story? Is it somebody who's trying to uncover what's going on with the murders? Does it have that detective kind of feel? Is it a multi-perspective thing with chapters from multiple point of view characters?
Exactly.
How's it built?
Yes, there's multiple characters. There is this guy I told you about, Kaz. Kazimierz Zemeckis is one of the characters. There's also there's some cosmonauts that you go into their brains for a little while. You also go into this lunar geologist. You go into a priest in Berlin who is Russian. You go into the mind of someone in the Ukraine who is commanding a lunar rover called Lunaholt. It's interesting. I learned so much about history through the window of this murder mystery, essentially. It's really cool. I did not know what to expect, but it surpassed
Okay.
everything I expected.
Okay.
It's hard for me to tell you more without giving things away. Ask me a question and I will give you a
No,
yes
let's
or
just
no
say
answer.
this. That passes the nuts and bolts test of a book I think I could enjoy. That coupled with your recommendation, that would normally for me be enough to be open to trying something out.
What if I try to get Chris Hadfield on and we can talk about it after the fact?
Heck yeah. Yeah, that adds a wrinkle. Yeah, now I kind of feel bad for
A
being
good
all
wrinkle.
picky and snooty and like, I'm the decider of what books should be read and not read. Oh, crap. Sorry, man. Sorry, Mr.
I'm
Astronaut.
very excited about it.
Please don't put me in your next book as a bad guy.
If you're interested, go to audible.com/NDQ or text NDQ to 500-500. That gets you a 30-day trial, a free book, and access to the library. Go to audible.com/NDQ. We can discuss. If this airs, then we know that you decided it was okay. There's tons of stuff on Audible. I mean, there's a million different things that I've listened to. Actually, not a million, like a lot of things I've listened to. I've been to space several times thanks to Audible. So, yeah, check this out. There's also a huge Audible Plus catalog. Once you become a member by going to audible.com/NDQ, you have access to the huge Plus catalog. Tons of really cool titles in there. I think you'll enjoy it. That's it. Audible.com/NDQ or text NDQ to 500-500. Get you a 30-day trial, free book, access to the Plus catalog. It's worth your time.
Let me pull back a little bit. We're still kind of on this cultural relevance of Star Wars. You know, one of the things that I thought about that Matt, you hinted about, but it brought up another question in my mind, which is think about his time in history when Star Wars came out. To your point, it's a hero's journey story. It's a very, to your question, Destin, which we did not answer, and Matt, I'm sure, can give a much more detailed answer than I can.
No, you got this.
But a hero's journey, it's got like 12 steps. It's a pattern of stories that has been around for a very long time. And it's typically focused around this idea of the chosen one, usually someone who lives in a backwoods area like Tatooine or Jakku or all of these other Star Wars planets where you have all of these chosen one figures come from.
Or under the stairs.
Under the stairs in Harry Potter.
Aunt and you're nobody.
Living with his aunt and uncle in New York, as Spider-Man was. I mean, you could just go through.
So like the Odyssey. The Odyssey would be a hero's journey in ancient literature?
Yes. A little different cultural sensibilities, but the nuts and bolts. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the ultimate hero's journey is about a man who was born in Nazareth. He's born in this backwoods town and then blah, 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 blah.
Interesting.
We know the end of that story.
Yep.
I mean, we talked about Spider-Man. We talked about, Dune is a hero's journey. I could just sit here and talk about 12 different hero's journeys, but there's steps to it and there's different twists on it. There's different versions. They usually meet a mentor. The mentor usually dies pretty early. And so you've got Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original prequels. You have essentially all of the main characters who show back up in the sequel trilogy eventually die. And so it's a pretty standard form of story that we are all very used to. And what is very, at least appealing, I think, not just to me, but to everyone, is that there's something about it that you can almost project yourself onto it. That is such a standard story that you could look at it and say, this is a movie about a long time ago and a far distance away. But maybe I'm that kid who's going to do something great, who's going to come out of nowhere. And there's something very like wish fulfillment about it, I think. And it's also very familiar. So that is part of my answer, which is it is a familiar story, and it is a familiar story that landed at a good time. I mean, it came out in 1977. What the world is dealing with in 1977 doesn't look a lot different than what the world is dealing with right now. You have high gas prices. You have kind of the backslide ending of the Vietnam War. You have inflation. You have quote unquote malaise, to quote Jimmy Carter.
You're right.
And so it's at a time when people, it's at a time when people needed that. And this happens throughout the history of film. So the first Spider-Man movie, so the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, the first one was a huge box office hit because it was the biggest box office pull after 9/11. People needed something to feel kind of uplifting. There's some recent arguments to be made that Spider-Man No Way Home was the first big blockbuster after the pandemic, where people were excited to experience a movie together. And so it makes me wonder if I'm looking at the historical similarities, and there's no answer to this, but if I'm looking at the historical similarities between the late 1970s and now, what is our Star Wars? What is that thing that's going to bring us together? Is it the last couple Marvel movies that have happened? Have they already happened? Or is it something that's going to happen next year, something that's going to happen the year after? I mean, we don't know. Historians are bad at predicting the future. But these are the things I sit up in the middle of the night and think about. What is our Star Wars going to be? And I don't know what it is.
Not Star Wars.
Probably not Star
Is it the
Wars.
Marvel stuff? I mean, that's a really good question.
It may be Marvel, yeah.
It was, but out of phase 3 and into phase 4, it's dead in the water. It's dead.
Yes.
No one cares. It's not happening.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
What was phase 3 and phase 4? I don't know what those mean.
Nope. Phases 1 through 3 on the Marvel side were all of the Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, like the core.
Avengers.
Everybody knew these heroes
Okay.
existed before the movies even came out. Then in phase 2 and 3, you started to introduce characters who comic book fans maybe had heard of, but they couldn't tell you anything about them. When phase 1 happened, people knew Bruce Banner was the Hulk. People knew that name. A lot of people would have been able to tell you, Tony Stark, I think that was it. I mean, these are the most famous characters outside of the X-Men that Marvel has to serve up. And so you could trade on decades of history and nostalgia, and there's a reason these characters are popular. It's the best arcs that Marvel ever came up with. Everybody can relate in some way. The Avengers aren't so much a collection of superpowers. They're a collection of different types of stories. For example, Bruce Banner's story is not the hero's journey. That's the monster in the house. That's the Jekyll and Hyde archetype, which is a great archetype. Not everything needs to be hero's journey. And so each of the characters doesn't just represent superpowers. They represent a story you might connect with that is the narrative that most resonates with your experience. You put them all on a team, you give them all their strengths and weaknesses, then you give them opponents who represent your antithesis, your nega, your dark version of yourself. The story you hope doesn't happen about you, but there would be a sound bed of motives for such an evil version of you to happen, and then you have them fight the thing out. And once you get past that core group, the stories are thinner. I feel like Black Panther is the last character they introduced where the story is going to resonate with a ton of people. And not just because he's black. It's because
It's a great story.
the story
It's a great
archetype
story.
transcends the whole planet, and there are people everywhere who relate to his version of the story. Once you get past that first batch, now you're repeating story archetypes. It's why Guardians are just space Avengers. And if they didn't have James Gunn at the helm to make it wildly fun, it'd feel a little bit repetitive. You'd be like, I already get it. So you get into the end of phase 3, you introduce these ancillary characters who just aren't based on a really strong story structure that anybody resonates with. And they just don't do as well. They just take up space. They become a mechanism to make the plot move forward. But we can tolerate it because we still have to deal with the dark version of ourselves, which is a giant purple monster man who I often get told I look like, who has motives. I get it.
Yeah.
It's a great Halloween costume.
My kids made all of my profiles that my kids make when they want to separate the kid one from the dad one. They put a Thanos picture up there and they label it inevitable. And that means it's mine
love it.
every time, man.
That's great.
Oh, that's great.
I can work with that. And so Thanos, we need to know that the hero character archetypes, the story types that we relate to, can defeat the scariest negative archetype, which is, what if I thought I was right, but I was wrong, and I was actually a monster, but I thought I was good? We deal with that insecurity, whether we think there's a God, not a God, at the spiritual soul level. And phase 3 took us to the point of rounding out this 10-year epic where everybody's got at least one good rooting interest on that screen. And so when Doctor Strange starts opening up all the portals and On Your Left happens and everybody emerges and people are weeping in theaters, it's not because the world became comic book nerds for 10 years. It's because walking through those portals was at least one person who is an idealized version of your story, warts and all, walking through there to defeat the evil version, the evil possibility of you, to thwart the scariest version of you. And we needed them to win. And we needed them to win in a way that involved sacrifice and heroism and all the lessons they had learned along the way, because it affected us and it mattered. Phase 4 is what's happened since, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It'll be forgettable. No one will ever care. It's nonsense. It's like the Star Wars holiday special or the Luke Skywalker Muppets appearance. Nobody cares. So I think the tension that is sitting out there that you're asking about, Destin, and that Amy, you brought up beautifully, is there a next story? Or was Marvel Phase 3, was Endgame the last time we can come together and agree that all of our stories could overlap and there is an evil version, a capacity for evil we all share, that we could all come together with our stories to defeat together? I hope we got another story in us.
And I'm sure we do. I mean, did people know that Star Wars was going to come out and be what it was? I mean, the people who created Star Wars did not expect it to be the phenomenon that it was. I mean, it only came out in, it was a really limited number of theaters initially, and then they expanded it because of the popularity. But let me add one more thread in here that kind of connects to what we were talking about in terms of the chaotic world of the Star Wars universe. Is you got this weird thing with Marvel between Disney and Sony. And so you have these two weird paths between the kind of Morbius being the most recent version, Venom of this own little subtle universe, the Sony universe that kind of crosses over into the Disney side, but kind of doesn't. Not to mention that Sony owns Spider-Man, right? And then there's the deal that... Anyway, there's going to be an inevitable legal break as well that's going to continue to cause chaos in the Marvel world. So I think maybe, unfortunately, we're looking at that developing in the same way that Star Wars is, that it's just, and to Matt's point, you lose the connection to the characters. I mean, it's not only are you connecting with the characters, you're seeing yourself in them, but look, I mean, I think the first Iron Man came out in like 2004. I mean, as I'm sitting in something like that,
a little later.
Sometime when I was a teenager. Let's go with that.
Okay.
But
that's how it is. Oh, dear.
But as I'm sitting and watching Endgame, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I remember high school me watching Iron Man and really liking it. And then me when I lived in California and watching these other specific movies. And it like brings your life together in a weird way because you have these cultural touch points. And so there's this culmination when it comes to something like Endgame, which is huge. I mean, literally, it's let's bring all of the characters you have ever seen ever together, end it. And then it's like, what do you do? What do you do next? And so to your point, not only do we have these kind of, oh my gosh, B, C, D level superheroes that people don't really know, that doesn't mean you can't necessarily elevate their stories, but they just don't have the historical tie. But remember, I mean, when did Endgame come out? 2018, 2019? This was all right before the pandemic. And so it's interesting how Phase 3 kind of went out as the pandemic and everything, the chaos of the last couple of years has come in. And it's really symbolized the fracturing of Phase 4 as well. And this is really depressing. So I don't know. So I don't know what our Star Wars will be, but I do have faith that we will have one.
Let me ask you this, Amy, being, the keeper of memories or the guardian of memories, what was Star Wars before Star Wars? Was there a story or a mythology, like way back in the day, you had, all the Greek mythology and stuff like that. But now in the 1800s, 1900s, moving towards us, was there anything in there? Not now, but you know what I'm trying to say. Was there any stories in that era that kind of unified people? And
that is a much bigger question. I think that it actually sounds.
I don't know of anything. There probably was something regionally, but we as a people weren't as unified when the internet and mass media started rising. So I don't know if there was anything like that.
That's actually kind of where my brain is going. Is movies especially have been a unifier in the absence of the unifiers that we used to have in history. And so back in let's say the 19th century and before, you don't have the internet, to your point, you don't have the internet, you don't have mass media. You are pretty well connected to the people, theoretically, in your own little community. In the United States, your state being a really big part of your identity. But as we've gone through history, beginning in the 20th century and then the 21st century, as people have gotten more connected and less connected at the same time, and we've gotten more diverse in good ways, but also more fractured politically and ideologically, there are not as many things, in part because we're just a lot of people. There's a lot of people in this country that unify us. And so I really don't know the answer to your question, because I think movies have taken the place of things that used to exist before movies did.
So maybe that's why Star Wars was so important when it did hit. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's part of it. I think, one of the things that historians talk about a lot is, that movie did come out during the course of the Cold War, right before the Cold War really ramped back up, during a time when, I will say, this is a vast oversimplification, but there is something to it. There was something very unifying about the idea of, we are on this side and the Soviet Union is on that side, and then you can kind of mirror that into a film like Star Wars. But then 1991, when you see the end of the Soviet Union, now it's like, what do people believe in? And not the what do people believe in, but like what unites people?
There wasn't a common enemy.
What is it? What's the common enemy? We don't have one anymore. And so like I said, I think movies have taken that place. I kind of want to, unless you guys have something else, I kind of want to move us back a little bit. Let's get
go
back
for
in
it.
Star Wars world, although this is really fascinating. We talked about the prequels a little bit, and I have so many thoughts that I would like to discuss.
Can we do this just for my order of operation? Because I know towards the end of the episode, we're going to have to rank our movies. Can you just go through what movie was released when? It doesn't matter the year, but just like the order. So we started with...
So 77 was A New Hope, which was Star Wars when it was released.
Okay.
But A New Hope, followed by Empire Strikes Back.
And
then Return of the Jedi.
Ever.
And then we take a break for like 20 years. And then Phantom Menace.
Literally taking notes. Attack of the Clones.
Revenge of the Sith, which is actually a good movie, I think. And then you've got Force Awakens. Where does Rogue One fit? Is that before Last Jedi or after Last Jedi?
I don't remember.
Somewhere.
So Rogue
One and Last Jedi in there. Rogue One is its own kind of thing. It's not part of the trilogy. And then you have Solo in there somewhere.
That was a mistake. Okay, Solo. Yeah.
That was not great. And then you have Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker. Okay, got it. Okay, perfect. This is very helpful. Yeah. Rise of Skywalker. Okay.
We're not counting the Clone Wars theatrical release debut film because it was really just a TV show repackaged for movies, right?
I was going to say we could, but to be honest, it's been so long since I've seen it that it's not going to have a place in my ranking. So that's going to go in TV land.
It was just like the first 4 or 5 episodes. It was the first arc just presented as a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we don't count it.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So the prequels, the reason we call them prequels are because we had the original 3, and then those other 3 came out: Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. And so what were you saying about the prequels? Thank you for indulging me on that list.
You are welcome. No, I was just going to say we keep kind of turning a little bit to the prequels, so I want to dive in a little bit more on this.
Let's go.
In part because I just rewatched them and I have so many thoughts, and they make me very angry.
I'm jumping in, both feet.
And here is why they make me angry, not for the reasons that you would suspect. They make me angry because they could have been good. I was watching these movies, and there's just these little really interesting threads in the prequels about like the political intrigue. There's all of this allegory about like the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. And that is fascinating to me. Like I love that stuff. And I think those are the pieces that really have lived on, that you see pieces of those pop back up in Rise of Skywalker. You see even in Kenobi, you see some references to that, which I know you haven't seen. We see references to the prequels. And so that's why it made me so mad, because I think there's such an interesting like political discussion to be had about the prequels, but because the dialogue was very poor, the CGI has not lasted, some of the casting was very strange, but even for really, like, so Natalie Portman's a great actress. They gave her terrible dialogue. And so she sounds terrible. She looks like a bad actress, and she's not. And so here's my question, because we've kind of touched on this and we can dive in a little bit more. Because of this interest in Star Wars and all these different factions, is it time for us to look again at the prequels? Have they been redeemed by, let's go real deep on this, like this online meme culture of people who love the prequels, or are they just as bad as they've ever been?
I do follow a subreddit called Prequel Memes. I do.
It's a great. I love a good set of prequel memes. So that's the thing, but that's like it makes you really feel a little bit warmer towards the prequels. What do we think about them? I mean, because like I said, they just make me angry.
Well, I think we owe the prequels.
They could have been good.
A little bit of gratitude for. I mean, how are you going to? I think about this a lot. Like, if you have a really good teacher in a subject at a school, and then that teacher retires, how are you going to be the person that follows that, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody had to restart the Star Wars thing, and it just happened to be the prequels. So is there anything that could have happened that we would have accepted as acceptable? I don't know. I don't know that I could have. I don't know. I mean, those original 3 movies were so magical, and once we left all that stuff with real film and real sets and all this stuff, and you have little robots, puppets kind of stuff, it's just, there's something magical about the way they film those. And then you fast forward and you're like, oh, computers. We can do anything with computers. It was just in this really weird time where we didn't have believable CGI. And I don't know. I think I am grateful for the prequels specifically because it got us back into Star Wars. I don't think they're great, but it's kind of like watching old MacGyver episodes, which I kind of like to do. You know what I mean?
There's the nostalgia of it. We are far enough separated from the prequels that we feel nostalgic about them. I think that's kind of where I am.
Exactly.
I think we're far enough from them that we're willing to give them a little more of the benefit of the doubt because there's a campy innocence to it that we all miss. We talked when we were evaluating Top Gun Maverick about really 2 different types of fundamentalism. One that dominated culture in the 1980s, one that dominates culture now. It's inflexible. It represents a minority position. But when you have a fundamentalist set of values that are irrefutable, inarguable, there is no self-criticism or self-awareness within fundamentalism. It is we are right and we must take ground by power. And that's the group at any given time that you just have to accommodate. Spirit of the age. There's always some fundamentalist group that wields tremendous power in culture. We talked about how Top Gun was able to navigate that twice. They navigated one far extreme end of the distribution socially in the 1980s with their film, and then they navigated another completely different opposite end of the distribution version of fundamentalism now. Very deft, very impressive. But there wasn't one in 1999. There wasn't. You're right. The cracks had shown at that point on Christian American fundamentalism that those expressions of Christian culture that were just weird and really they needed to be checked. And everybody kind of got it at that point, or most people did. And so you weren't seeing film and art bending over backwards to appease that anymore. But the new opposite and equal reaction of fundamentalism didn't have its hooks in things yet either. So nobody was clamoring to try to do that. And there was this little window that I view as being about 10, 15 years long, where it was like, no, everybody can just laugh at this stuff. Everybody can go to the thing. There's going to be things here that rub you the wrong way, whatever. You're just going to have to get it in. And the prequels have all kinds of jabs at George W. Bush and the Iraq invasion and things like that.
Do they really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, on Mustafar, when he and Anakin are fighting and Anakin hits the line about, if you're not with me, you're against me. And I mean, that was Bush. If you're not with us, you're for the terrorists. It's so not obvious now. But when it was said, everybody in the theater like either cheered or groaned. I remember the reaction. You could just tell this room is split down the middle on whether or not they like W and whether or not they want to invade Iraq. And when Ewan McGregor hits the ironically not self-aware only Sith deal in absolutes in the same duel, like, are you kidding me?
Which is in and of itself an absolute, yeah.
Oh, I guess it is.
Yes.
I feel so stupid.
And like Team America World Police, the same
I just now
year.
realized that's an absolute. And I did not realize that you had to tell me that, Amy. Wow. Okay.
Yes. Team America is ribbing that even when something came out right after where they're like, freedom is the only way. There was just this sense at that point. You see it in the humor of the British Office, the American Office, the first few seasons maybe of Parks and Rec, the first few seasons of Community. Community is the show that demonstrates the shift from everybody's just here and we're going to make fun of each other to a new version of fundamentalism and a new power in group that has to be appeased with language. I'm not even saying the power in group is wrong. The power in groups in both of these eras, I think, are wrong about stuff and I think have valid points on stuff. My point isn't to say, I don't like fundamentalism. That is my point. And my secondary point is part of the redeeming value of the prequels is that they happened in a middle spot in the fundamentalist pendulum swing in the history of our culture. And it works better now than it did back then. Even though there were some jabs there that made people uncomfortable, those circumstances have sailed downriver. They don't bother anybody anymore. You just go watch the thing and it just feels like kiddish, low stakes, silly, fun space laser stuff. And it doesn't feel like that anymore.
Yeah, we're watching it out of context, essentially. I mean, it's we're not watching into the context of the time. But it's interesting. One of the things, and this gets to why I said these prequels made me angry, is there's such an interesting narrative to bring it down to the actual politics of the film. There's such an interesting narrative about this tension between empire and republicanism. One of the things, as an annoying historian, that really bothered me about the prequels is that they interchange the words democracy and republic all the time. And I'm just sitting there like...
Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? Clarify it.
They're not technically the same thing. A republic being a system where you have a set of representatives, a Senate, for example. Democracies can have representatives, but they typically, in the purest form, are more majority rule. The United States is kind of a blend of both of them. I mean, it was literally, there's one scene when Padme literally in one sentence says something about the Galactic Republic and says, "We have to protect democracy." And I'm like, what? Anyway. But there's something really interesting that is fascinating to me, which I wish was not clouded over by all of this mess of the prequels. To do a brief recap of the prequels, what's happening here, politically speaking, is that you have this Galactic Republic that is trying to control a massive galaxy. And there are certain places in the galaxy, like Tatooine, that are essentially outside of the Republic, that are being run by gangsters. And then you have this subtle Sith influence trying to bring in the force of the Empire, which, spoiler alert, eventually happens. But the Empire is coming in on behalf of order, on behalf of calming the chaos, which is so true of any sort of dictatorial system coming in and saying, well, they're all disagreeing, I will find an answer. There's such interesting allegory there. But what I find most fascinating and almost not baffling, but because I just watched the prequels, it's on my head. You all, at least Matt, you probably have heard of the Empire was right theory, right? The theory that they were actually the good guys. I can see how you can get that from the prequels. Not that I agree with it, but it seems as if parts of the prequels are this criticism of the government as it is structured, criticism of the Republic for not being able to govern the outskirts, for always arguing so someone like Palpatine comes in and takes over.
The impotence of the Jedi.
The impotence of the Jedi. I mean,
the ineptitude.
Exactly. And so it's a fascinating political opinion or political position, because there's fairness to it, but it's almost being told from the narrative. I mean, literally, the prequels are being told from the narrative of an eventual emperor, of an eventual dictator. And that's kind of the voice on top of the prequels that I just find really interesting. And so I was actually sitting back thinking, why is the Republic not working? And I think part of it, let me put my historian hat back on here. You want to talk real deep history. Let's look at it in comparison to the United States, which was founded as a republic with the elements of democracy, and we won't get into the nuances of it. But one of the things that James Madison was really central in and was really focused on was this theory of the extended republic. The theory of the extended republic came out of the fact that republics historically before the United States didn't last very long. They had to be very small, couldn't be over a wide amount of space. But Madison's theory was, we have all this space. This is where manifest destiny, quote unquote, comes from in the United States. We have all this space, and if we extend our republic with this system of federalism, we have all of these little republics governed by a national government, and people can move, in conflict. People can just literally move west. There will be a way to govern that. And we do actually see some historical precedent of that. And then after the Civil War, I promise this has a point, after the Civil War, imagine if the Civil War had happened in the city of St. Louis, and then it's over, and none of us can leave. And we're all stuck with the same people we were just warring with. That doesn't happen after the Civil War in the United States. A bunch of people go west. We spread out. We're able to create our own communities. And so, getting back to Star Wars, you see a similar element here in that you have a very extended republic, but it's a republic that is too extended, that is not made up of smaller republics in many cases. There's different sets of governings on lots of these systems. But also, here's the key. Here's how I figured it out. And I would be curious to see what you guys think about this. So much of these movies do seem like a criticism of the Republic, but what pops up in the Attack of the Clones is this big debate over whether the Republic is going to have an army. And that's how the clones show up and all of this. the Republic never had an enforcement mechanism. They would just send Jedi throughout the galaxies on peacekeeping missions, expecting that to be enough to keep things stable. They needed an army, even though that is not actually the message of Attack of the Clones. And so that is my word vomit of all of my thoughts on the Republic and the Empire tension in the prequels. And I'm curious if you all came, mostly Matt, because Destin might be
no,
out of it, thinking about midichlorians.
This was fascinating. So
No, he's got this.
You're making me think about what would the United States look like if it only had special forces. That's basically what you're saying, right?
Exactly. I mean, think about if this. I mean, this is literally what they're dealing with in Attack of the Clones. They have these separatist forces who are threatening to leave the Republic. Think about during the Civil War when the South secedes. If the North had no army, I mean, what would you do? You'd have to get the states together, and that would take time, and it would be a whole thing. And so it's an unworkable system. But it doesn't seem like the point of the prequels is that it's an unworkable system. Does that make sense? I mean,
yes, it does.
Anyway. I thought too much about this.
So I'm sitting here. I've got a website up reading about the extended Republic theory of James Madison. This is fascinating. You are all the way down the rabbit hole.
I went
That's
really
amazing.
far down the rabbit hole.
What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
The old fourth turning theory, the generational theory of evaluating modern history, seems to be what the prequels are riffing on. You are definitely in the quarter turn there of good times make soft people. Good times make weak people. Well, what happens right after that? Well, weak people make bad times, and that's what we see in episodes 4, 5, and 6. And those bad times make good people. We watch those heroes evolve, and then good people never really get around to making good times between episode 6 and 7. Apparently, they just utterly fail to govern in any way that they don't.
Every time they fail to govern.
Yeah. Yep. And then the result is you've got this new gigantic thing that I just don't think the sequels is very well defined. The sequel series, who are the bad guys? What are they? We're trying harder there to make analogies about now and not offend sensibilities than we are to make the sides make any sense or flow out of the existing story in any way that fits with human nature. It's just a mess. Where's the money? And then at the last minute, they try to throw together a solution. Oh, well, a clone of Emperor Palpatine just summoned them out of thin air, a creation ex nihilo of a fleet. It's just, the sequels they break because though they are shot better and even acted better, nothing anyone is doing makes any sense given human nature or the unfolding of history. Whereas the prequels, I got to give it to you, you are making a great case for everybody's actions make sense on a meta scale. What would a republic in the spiral of the downward spiral toward authoritarianism, what would they do? Oh, interesting. What would it look like as this Republican era, not Republican like GOP, but like Republican style government,
Little R,
spirals and breaks? What would the fractures look like? And also, everything looks like the fundamentals of it are strong until the day that Atlantis crashes into the sea. And then suddenly, oh, Babylon fell in a night. Wow. Tip of the hat, Cyrus the Great. I thought it was invincible. And that's kind of what happens with those stories. It resonates with history because that's how it breaks. It just, stuff builds up, people ignore it, boom, it's over in a night. And the sequels don't give us any of that. But on the Madison side of things, and your observations about the stuff that Madison was advocating for in terms of making a republic expandable, future-proof, insanity-proof, insane swings in public opinion proof, warmongering proof, what do you think the Republic could have done to have avoided that and to have the whole Star Wars story play out differently?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Let me say this. The Star Wars universe has no answer. Because every time the Republic comes back and the New Republic comes back, they always face the same threats. It's the same story over and over and over again, which in many ways is somewhat true to history.
Is there a lesson in that? Is there a reason it doesn't work, or is it just bad writing?
That's a great question. I think maybe it's a bit of both. I mean, I think one of it is outside of the prequels, I'm not sure anyone has sat and thought. Well, actually, I'm sure many people have sat and thought about
You
this.
have, yeah.
I have. Like the Amy's of the world have thought about it, but I'm not sure anyone at the helm of Star Wars has really thought, okay, how would we govern this system? I don't know. I mean, I to go back to the Federalist Papers, there's an argument to be made that, you have a system of, federated, a couple smaller republics that make them larger, several systems all together making a republic. In a similar way, let's bring back the EU, the actual European Union. Maybe there's a model there of these countries that are separate countries but together in a federation and in a way that is more manageable. I don't know. I mean, the fact that I don't have an answer, I think makes me angry. But I think this is why the prequels make me angry. But I want to actually distill this a little bit. You talk so much about the macro level things, and obviously I was the one who brought it up. But another thing, we're spending a lot of time on the prequels here, which is great. Another thing that really stuck out to me is rewatching those movies. There's so many things on an individual level that actually are really well done. So you look at, we talked about this at the beginning of the episode, the narrative, the arc of Anakin Skywalker, going from quote unquote good and turning to evil. And this is why I say quote unquote. So Qui-Gon Jinn is the most influential character in this series for one reason. He, over the instruction of the Jedi Council, over the worries of Obi-Wan Kenobi, was determined to train Anakin Skywalker. Despite the fact that you have Yoda and everyone else saying, look, this guy has a very cloudy future. He's a little arrogant. He's all this kind of stuff. So once you pop into the second movie, my God, Anakin Skywalker is fascinating, but the most annoying character in the history of the world because he's arrogant. He's been told that he's been great his entire life. He's been told he's been the chosen one.
Misa thinks there's somebody more irritating than him.
Okay.
But you could be right.
Yeah, Jar Jar. Yeah.
It's a tie. The most irritating, perhaps, Jedi figure in this film, yes, we'll put Jar Jar off on the side with his terrible CGI once again. But and that's, you see an area where Palpatine is able to come in and say, look, all of this instruction that Obi-Wan is giving you is he's just jealous of you. He's just critical of you. And so I'm sitting here watching these films thinking, Anakin Skywalker needed therapy. He did not need a lightsaber when he was 9 years old. I mean, he was a kid who was sold into slavery at like the age of 3. He's taken away from his mother. He's dealing, I mean, if you want to take this on a human level, he's dealing with massive amounts of trauma. Having literally the fate of the galaxy put on his shoulders. Of course this guy turned the wrong direction. He didn't have a time to deal with all of the things that he was dealing with. So that I found actually very fascinating. Because I'm sitting there thinking, like, it's pretty obvious this, you shouldn't train this kid, and then maybe it's the benefit of hindsight, but you see where
I love that. That whole monologue you just that was amazing. Thank you. I have a question for you. So that was all zoom out. That was big picture. Talked about prequels and stuff. I have a simpler question. Mm-hmm. When we first met you and we were talking about doing this whole, thing where you jump on and teach us stuff every once in a while, we asked you what color lightsaber you would use. And you said red.
Yes, I did.
Why red? Because red is typically associated with like evil. And before you answer that, we went down to the thing at Disney World where the kids get to make a lightsaber. Mm-hmm. And my kids got to make a lightsaber. 3 of my kids did. And my son, my youngest son, is my thinker. He's really smart. He's a rule follower. And I said, well, what color are you going to pick? Because you get to pick what color lightsaber you have in there. He goes, I'm going to get red. I said, oh, you're going to get red? Yeah, I'm going to get red. I said, why? He said, it's awesome. I said, that's what Anakin had, right? Like Darth Vader had red. He goes, yeah, I know. But I want red, and that's what I'm going to do. I said, okay. And we went in the little room, and, they do a great job there at the shop, whatever they call it. And the lights go down and the smoke or whatever it is, and the guy goes, you must select your kyber crystal, and you must select the color. And he's going through all the colors, and he's blue. This is, and he's going through all of them. And then he gets to red, and he goes, and of course, red. And he talks about some of the evil stuff. He goes, but those are tales for another day. And he, like the emotion what they did with the lights and everything. And then immediately they go, now you must select your crystal. And they like instantly after saying red, they go straight to the kids. They look straight at my son. They go, what is your crystal? And they put it out in front of him. And his little hand, I still remember, it reaches over and it grabs the purple Kyber crystal. And I said, you got purple? He goes, yeah. I said, could you not take it? And he goes, no.
Too much pressure.
I couldn't do it.
From the cast member,
it's so good. But you, however, unapologetically have selected red as your lightsaber, and I want to know why.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Now, it's not the obvious reason because I think the Empire were actually the good guys. No, they weren't. But I think in the Star Wars universe, the villains are just more interesting. I think they're better written characters. I think Darth Vader is like the greatest character in the history of Star Wars. And something that maybe get me into trouble is I think Kylo Ren has a fascinating arc. Kind of stumbles there at the end because there's weird stuff that happens at the end of the trilogy. They didn't see it through.
They didn't see it through, but he's the only one who's having fun in that series.
He is, and he's the only one who has a story. I mean, does anyone else in the sequel actually change from point A to point B? No. He actually has an arc. And so it's really because I think the villains are just much more interesting and in a way that's strangely much more realistic. Because you have a character, like, I mean, let's compare like the two primary female characters from the most recent series. You have Jyn Erso in the Rogue One and Rey in the trilogy. This may get me into trouble. Jyn Erso is a fascinating character because she's complicated. She was with the rebellion and then out of it and then ends up dying for the cause, unexpected, all of these kind of things. Rey is not that interesting. I mean, she's essentially Luke Skywalker and then they give her the same story, and so.
But here's why you're not going to get in trouble, Amy, because no one who thinks that Rey is good cares.
That's true. That's fair.
Everyone who cares is like, but what are you doing? Look at what you did look at where you ended her. What the heck? Like, you just made her Luke, but also gave her Leia braids, and then like she just did some stuff and just knew how to do it, and she was really good. Yeah, she's not interesting. So the people who care and follow this story are not going to be angry with you, and the people who don't care don't feel anything about it. Like, they went and they ate some popcorn and they were fine. So no, I think you're safe. I think you're going to be good.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, and that's my answer. It's just I think the villains are much more interesting. And I think one of the greatest scenes, if not the greatest scene in the history of Star Wars.
Are you about to say Rogue One?
Is the hallway scene in Rogue One.
Yes, it is. It is amazing. That is genuine fear that it's terrifying.
Just the lightsaber lighting up in the dark and it's so good. And so that's my answer. I just think the villains are just much more interesting people.
Yes. The moment where Ian McDiarmid, the guy who plays
Palpatine,
the Emperor, who apparently must have been like 19 when they shot the first one, because he's still in the game. It's the same guy for all of it. The moment where he's walking, which is all they do in the prequels, walking against a CGI background. He's walking with Anakin Skywalker, and he's looking forward, and he's in profile, and he's like, even the ways of the dark side. And he opens his mouth like, I said dark side. Whoa, my hand is revealed. It's just like, you get it. Twirl your evil mustache. Twiddle your fingers together. Tie the damsel in distress to the railroad tracks. Like, you understand, sir. Well done. And he's just having a hoot. He's CGI flying around doing spirals like M. Bison flying toward people with lightsabers and howling and hooting. He's just great. I can't get, and he's delighted to be electrocuting you. There's nothing he'd rather be doing today than electrocuting you right here, right now. He's so much fun. I can't get enough. I would love just a whole Emperor series.
I gotta tell you, I would pay good money for an Emperor series or like a Darth Vader. Here's my two dreams. A Darth Vader series that is just Darth Vader. Kenobi is probably the closest we're going to get to having a Darth Vader series. Or a like office style workplace almost drama comedy about what's going on in either the Senate or the early Empire and just all of these like little stormtroopers
like on the Death Star
on the Death Star, like going around living their lives while all of these crazy things are happening around them.
Undercover Boss with Kylo Ren.
I love that scene.
Well, we got that from the SNL Undercover Boss when Adam Driver was on there. Where's my muffin, Matt?
That's actually not where I got it, but I love it so much.
Is
I
that
love
canon? Is that
Yes.
SNL skit canon?
It is
Yeah.
in my heart. It is right here. Right here.
I got to tell you, so in that scene at the very end, he holds up a picture about teamwork with a photo of stormtroopers on it. And he's like, I know what this means now. I have been looking for that poster to put it in my office for years. But yes, I want a television show version of that. It would be the greatest thing in the world. Greatest.
I want to be on that.
I assume that means that Darth Vader's your favorite character.
I think that's fair, yes.
That's bold, Amy Lutz. That is a bold. Yeah, I mean, you just came right out there and said that. I respect that.
All right, well, let's think about it. I mean, when you think about what do little kids like dress up for Halloween after in the 70s and 80s and when the prequels come out, all these kids are dressing up as Darth Vader. You got like a couple Luke Skywalkers. You got some kids with like Mace Windu lightsabers going around. Kids are dressed up as Darth Vader. My brother was Darth Vader for like 3 years. If I could have had the, I don't know, courage to dress up as Darth Vader as a small child, I would have done it. I was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz because I grew up in Kansas, but my spirit animal was Darth Vader.
No reason you can't make up for that now. So much life left.
You just made me remember a moment of shame in my life, and
Yes.
I'd forgotten that this had happened, but I remember ringing a doorbell, dressed up as Darth Maul, and the way we did it is my friend Cliff was huge and strong, and I got on Cliff's shoulders, and we had a black drape that went over both of us, and we used his arms and my head in the mask, and he had the dual-ended lightsaber thing, and yeah, I do regret that now.
You should have gone from there straight to the bank and tried to pull off a withdrawal in your parent's name. Hello,
Not
we are
too good for the
adults.
trench
I
coat.
mean, I am an adult, and I need to make a get money
Fantastic.
out purchase.
You guys made me realize I've been consuming Star Wars at a surface level, and there's just I just need to just tip the cup up and just drink.
You don't need to. You can consume it When we sat and watched Book of Boba Fett together, you and I, a few months ago, like you and your family, you were like, cool. Me and my family, we were like, oh no. Oh dear. Oh no. We paused for a minute and we did what we would do at home, which is either this is awesome, I see what they're doing and get all excited, or oh no, this is missing. And we started to do that, and immediately we were like, and you made the little kill it gesture. And it's like, oh yeah, that's fair. Like, yeah. And I understood what you were saying. You were saying like don't kill the magic. It's just not how we consume this. Like, let us have our show. That's entirely fair. 20-year-old me would have been like, well, if you looked a little bit closer at these things, you'd understand there are actually some very important issues, and you would see it my way. Let's do a 6-hour sit down, and I can walk you through it with a chart.
Who was that character that
Now
you just
me is
acted like that guy
It was-
needs
it
God,
to?
you know what's
me.
great about
That was me. That was 30-year-old Amy.
That was you.
No, the point is, the beautiful thing about art, Ben Folds, one of my favorite musicians ever, somebody was asking him about one of his songs, all his songs, tell a story, it's elaborate, it's clearly just rooted in a moment, but you can kind of inflict whatever you want from your own life into his little songs, his little stories. Somebody was asking him, what does this one mean? Doesn't matter which song it was. And he's like, I don't care, man. Like, I know exactly what it means for me. Nobody who listened to this lived that story. There are going to be notes that are struck that resonate with you and take you to your place and your thing. The song is honest. It's exactly what I thought about what happened in that moment, and that's all it is. Do with it what you need to. And the honest thing here, there's two levels. Are people using myths to achieve the things they want to achieve and nudge things the way they want to nudge it? Yes, of course. It's always been the case. If you like where it's being nudged, maybe you resonate with it. If you don't, maybe you don't. But also, it's okay to just watch a story and be like, that was fun. Cool. That's great. And it's not a naive or dumb way to watch it, though I did used to think that. I like pop music, and I don't care that people think it's dumb that I like Carly Rae Jepsen and super complex prog rock. I can like both. I like the art of the hook. That's awesome. Good job, Carly Rae. I think you're awesome. I also like weird, complex, all kinds of oaky note, overly developed wine tasting, fancy art consumption. It's okay to like both, and it's okay to decide which things you're going to allow yourself to deep dive into and which things you're going to be like, nah, for me, I am going to have fun with this, and it's going to benefit my life if I consume it this way.
Absolutely.
So consume it the way you want.
And so Star Wars is big enough where you can pick and choose. Is that how it works for you, Amy?
And I think that actually gets back to what we started with. It's yes, you can pick and choose, but you can, in a sense, make it what you want of it. Like, are you the high school kid like me who went to the library and got all of the extended universe books and then has clearly thought about this for the last 20 years very, very in-depthly? You could be that person. Or you could be like how I watch Marvel movies. I like them. They're fun. I watch them. And then I go home and I do something else. They are what you make of them. And there is nothing wrong with that. I mean, to Matt's point, that's art. You can go in as deep as you want, or you can just kind of paddle around.
Where do you think we should go now?
I think we've made it to the end of the ride, so to speak, which is, let's talk about the movies. Let's talk about where they fit. And I'm very curious, with Destin's paddling and Matt and my more deep dive, where these movies fit. Who wants to go first? You want me to go first, or do you guys want to go first? What is your ranking of the Star Wars movies?
Yeah, I probably should go first because I
think your opinion is the big payoff, so I think Destin and I should go first.
I would agree.
Yeah. I love Rogue One. I think it's amazing. We just get to experience. Matt and I talked about this a while back. You're not told how awesome these people are. You get to see them on, fighting, and you get to see everything. It was just, it was the first new movie that I thought was just well written. So that's going to be my top one. My bottom one is going to be Solo, and the way it stacks up relative to that. So Rogue One is the best, and then you got the old three, or the original three, and then you get the prequels after that, and then the new stuff. It's all right. I would put it before the prequels, but I don't know. I don't. It's okay. Kylo Ren was cool. That's about it on the sequels for me, but the rest of it, I don't know. I'm excited about Mandalorian, but we're not talking about that. And I'm very excited to learn more about Obi-Wan. So what's it actually called? It's not called Obi-Wan, is it? Kenobi? I feel stupid now.
It's Kenobi.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at. I don't have super deep opinions. My favorite scene of everything is the lightsaber duel between Obi and Anakin. That's just amazing to me.
That's valid.
Yeah.
You're going to love Kenobi.
So,
well, maybe.
The second favorite scene was probably the in Rogue One, where the hallway scene. That's probably it. And for some reason, I think about cutting a tauntaun in half and crawling inside on cold days a lot. For some reason, that
the number of times I've told people I'm living on Hoth is rather embarrassing.
Right. Exactly.
Indeed.
I think about that a lot. So
and it works. Everybody knows what you mean.
It does. It does.
So Matt, I want to hear about yours. So what is the official question, Amy? So rank the movies in order?
Rank the Star Wars movies in your preferential order.
Okay. It's not hard. It hasn't changed since the early 1980s. Top spot is Episode 5. Empire's the best movie in the series. Rogue One went from middling low to me to, oh, wow, if that's where we're going with the sequels, that casts a new light on the prequels. That's a good show. I actually really like it. And it just has kept climbing the charts. I would put it 2 at this point. And what? What are we doing?
Just the authority in your voice right now is just, it's like, hey,
dude,
this
I've
isn't
thought
hard.
about this annually for 20 years.
This is an important
I'm sorry.
question.
This matters.
I'm sorry. I want to play with the adults. Keep going. I'm sorry. I'm listening. Please forgive me.
Destin.
Yes.
Top 5 rockets that have broken the gravitational pull of the planet on which we live. Do you have them?
You give me 5 minutes. I could write that list. Thank you. I understand now. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So you have an opinion. That's good.
Yes.
You know what I like about rockets?
What?
The way the fire comes out the back and they go right up, like they just blast off into space. And it's so neat and it's so much power. And I just think, holy cow, now that's in space. Like that's where I'm at with rockets. I think they're just great.
Yeah.
They look cool.
I just appreciate them in a different way than you do. So,
number
lists.
1, Empire Strikes Back. Number 2,
Yes.
Rogue One. Okay.
Yes, that's exactly.
I'm taking notes.
Do not engage. Okay, I would go probably 4, New Hope in the 3rd position. And then it gets real muddy. I would put Return of the Jedi. I'd lump that in with all of the prequels. And if episodes 8 and 9 hadn't happened, I'd actually bump 7 pretty close to the top of the list. I had a lot of fun in episode 7. It's just now I know none of it paid off. And in the same way that the final season of Game of Thrones just made me no longer care. There's no reason to rewatch it. There's no reason to care about the characters. Nothing matters. I'm indifferent. It's dead to me. So episodes 8 and 9 just made me totally indifferent to the entire sequel series and sort of Star Wars in general. Post episode 6, I just don't care. The stakes don't matter. Nothing matters. It's a clown show. It's a joke.
What?
So if we'd stopped at episode 7, episode 7 would rank really high because I had a blast. I thought it was genuinely fun, even with all of its flaws. But because 8 and 9 exist, 7's got to go way down toward the bottom after the prequels. The sequels all rank out at the bottom, but Solo is a dumpster fire. It ranks last. However, if you let me bring in series, TV shows, things that are canonical, my number 1 is the animated Clone Wars series, if this still counts as canonical. The guy who did Samurai Jack did this phenomenal series of Clone Wars era hand-drawn animation that was released in tiny little increments, 5-minute blocks on Cartoon Network in like 2004. They are great. That's where you learn who General Grievous is, why he's going around gasping and hunching. All of that fits together. The Jedi are awesome and fascinating, but you can also see what's wrong with them. This dude just anticipated everything about where the story had to go based on the character arcs. It fleshes out the prequels and makes the prequels look better and more watchable. That would be my number 1 thing I've ever seen from Star Wars ever. My number 2 Star Wars thing would be the Clone Wars or Bad Batch. If you separate them out, I'd go Bad Batch as number 2. Clone Wars is number 3. Mandalorian as number 4. And then I would go Empire, Rogue One, a bunch of stuff. And I'd put Boba Fett and Obi-Wan clear down there with Solo and sequel series. There you go. That's my answer.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm going to go from the bottom up because that's more fun.
Well, that's more interesting.
That is more fun.
So the one thing we're all going to agree on is that Solo will take my last spot.
So I did good.
Be at the bottom.
So I got
there.
one thing correct?
You might have more than that. Let's find out.
Correct.
So Solo at the bottom. You can't replace Harrison Ford, although it did have a very interesting twist at the end. I will give it that. Followed by, this is where I differ from Matt, followed by Phantom Menace. No, sorry, followed by Clone Wars, then Phantom Menace, because I hate Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones, Phantom Menace, going up. Here's where it gets controversial. Rise of Skywalker. It has like 5 minutes I like in it. It's only okay. Then Force Awakens. Then Last Jedi, above Force Awakens. Then we get to Revenge of the Sith, which I have put above all of these other movies. Then you go to Return of the Jedi, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back. I also have Rogue One in the top spot.
Yes! Yes!
Okay.
This is my controversial list. Not so controversial.
What is the distance between the good films and the bottom feeders, though?
Okay, yeah.
That's a super great question.
Because for me, the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. You know, I let me tell you this. Before we started talking, I think I would have had a different answer.
Ooh.
Because we've talked so much about the prequels. So this has changed my mind. I would say the canyon was larger before this episode started. I think I have gotten less angry at the prequels since we started talking about it. So for me, it's actually not so much a canyon as it's just a gradual worsening movie for movie.
This conversation has also affected my rankings. I've been jotting down notes the whole time, and I had to tweak a few things. It's been good. It's been informative. Okay, but let me ask you this. what if we play by my rules and I let you enter Mandalorian, Clone Wars, Bad Batch,
Oh gosh.
Boba Fett, Obi-Wan? Does that do anything to the top of your list?
It does not do anything to the top of my list, but it does complicate it a little bit. I would put Clone Wars and I would put Mandalorian up there pretty high for me. I would put Kenobi higher than you have it, I think. But it's not near Mandalorian. I mean, that's middle. That's kind of middling Star Wars.
Well, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, it could turn into Boba Fett and just suddenly have another TV show up in the back half. I don't know.
Are you guys
favorite Jedi or Sith for you is Darth Vader, Amy? Is that where that sticks?
What was that?
Favorite Jedi Force wielder, it's Darth Vader?
Correct.
Destin?
Kenobi? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So are you guys excited about Ahsoka? They're going to make a series about Ahsoka Tano, right?
And now that's my favorite.
She's your favorite?
I'm excited.
Yep.
I think it'll be good as long as they stay true to her character as it has been written.
Yes.
And we get Thrawn showing up, which I am extremely excited about.
So I don't know Thrawn.
Benedict Cumberbatch, all blue.
No, they've cast him. Do you know they've cast him?
It is Benedict Cumberbatch, isn't it?
Are you serious?
No, so I think the best actor for Thrawn would be Mads Mikkelsen, who unfortunately has already been cast in Rogue One. His brother is playing Thrawn. That's what I've heard.
So who is Thrawn? Thrawn, which appears to be a shortening of
Blue.
Mithron Arundu or something. You could laugh at me, Amy.
I'm not laughing at you. I thought that was brave of you to try.
It was very brave.
I don't know how to say it. I'm not going to.
I was going to say, I'm not going to be helpful.
I'm not doing it.
Okay.
You're the bravest. So short version of the story. It's funny. I've got a former student who's like obsessed with him and is going to correct me for anything I say. But he was a villain from the EU, from some of the early books. Timothy Zahn, right? It was Heir to the Empire, where Thrawn pops up, who made it into the animated series and is now migrating over to the live action in Ahsoka.
Made it into Rebels. First appeared in Rebels, right?
In
Which
Rebels.
we haven't even talked about, and I didn't even include in my list.
Which is true. We didn't even include. But there's one scene when Ahsoka shows up in The Mandalorian where she's going to the temple place or whatever, and she grabs someone and she's like, "Where is Admiral Thrawn?" And then that indicated that he's coming in the show.
Yeah.
I freaked out.
As is Ezra Bridger, which that's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yes, that's
and
right.
I'm really interesting to see how they pay off all of the Old Testament namology of rebels. Like, why do you have somebody named Canaan? Why do you have somebody named Ezra, who is a bridger, like Ezra, who came back and rebuilt the temple and bridged civilizations? And like what are we doing with that? Is it all just thoughtless, or is there intentionality to names indicating the trajectory of the character? That'll be fun.
I would not have too much hope. I'm worried that they would. They might just mix that. But let's see. Let's see if it pays off.
Rebellions are built on hope.
This is a rebellion, isn't it? You're right.
This was so stinking fun. Amy, I have this saying that pops up all the time when I'm thinking about things that I enjoy. It's interested people are interesting, and you genuinely are interested in this. I would say it's beyond interested in this.
I think interested is a nice way to say it, but I appreciate it.
No, I mean this matters, and you care on a very deep level. And I mean what was it? You said James Madison, the extension of the Republic. That's something I'm gonna. Did I say that correctly?
The theory of the extended Republic.
And
one of my favorite pieces of historical writing, as should be everyone's, is Federalist Number 10.
Really?
Just throw that in there.
Okay.
That's a great one. That talks about democracy and republic. It's so great.
Okay. I need to go research this.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. I love this. This was a ton of fun. Matt, what are your thoughts here?
That was a blast. And I really like Amy, who
Thank you.
I know to be and respect as just a top-rate historian. You're great at this stuff. I learn tons of things from you every time. And it's fun to see an alternative history that you are applying your skills to. And it's fun to see you play in a different world with all the skills that you apply so deftly in this one.
Well, thank you. My next goal in life should be to be a Star Wars historian. I'm sure they exist.
I'm sure you might be one.
Maybe I am one of them. Here, let me say this. Can we wrap up on the iconic Star Wars question that I want to hear Destin's answer to first?
Yes. Before we do that, I just want to point out, if you would like to follow Amy, her Twitter is AmyLutz4. That's at AMYLUTZ, the number 4. So I just wanted to get that out there. And yes, what is the thing you'd like to wrap up on?
That's me. All right, Destin. Who shot first?
Han did.
You know the answer.
Han shot first.
Yeah, if you would have said Greedo, we would have, had a whole nother hour of talking. But yes, that's the answer.
That's the truth?
That is the truth. That is if you watch the original series without the weird remastering things, Han shot first. End of story.
Laserdisc.
Fits with his character. He's a redeemable scoundrel with a heart of gold.
Yes, he is.
He's not that if he shot second. Yeah.